We are back live on Market Monday.
Hello. It's good to be back.
All right, my man. Feels like it's been a second.
Yeah,
It's
it
like a
does.
long week.
It has
feels
been
like,
a long week.
Gosh, Easter kicked my butt.
Yeah, did you have a good Easter?
Yeah, it's busy. Yeah, we did all the Easter egg stuff.
Yeah.
Well, first we did the Easter pancake event here for like my clients with kids and stuff. That was last weekend. But then dyeing eggs. What did we do? How to do all the Easter basket stuff. We saw the Easter bunny over the weekend.
Yeah.
All the Easter stuff, dude.
You do a
Easter
hunt?
dinner. We did do a hunt. We had to do it inside because it
Yeah.
was raining, but got
Yeah.
that done. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, we did any Easter tradition. I think we hit it. So.
Yeah. It's a little different for me because I don't have kids at home.
Right.
We're doing like Easter egg hunts, but I went out on Saturday to check out open houses, and every open house I went into was like slam packed.
Was it?
Yeah, but Sunday was
Yeah.
sort of a wash. Now there were some open houses on Sunday that I went to, and those did not have anybody.
I was
in it,
gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like those realtors were like the real ones for being out there. One, in the deluge, the rain that we had all day, and the fact that most people were doing like Easter type stuff.
Yeah, we have an agent here. Like, all he does is like open houses. He does open houses all the time.
Yeah.
And I did a consultation the other night, and he was in here like 6 or 7 o'clock on a Friday, like making flyers for his open house.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, are you getting ready for open house? He's like, Saturday, Sunday. And I was like, dang, dude, on Easter? And he's like, yeah, of course. And I was like, I like it, dude.
Yeah,
He's out here trying to make it
grind
happen.
don't stop.
Yeah, the grind does not stop
Yeah.
for the Easter bunny.
So I do have a question for you related to like open houses. So when you have a client that is you're working with a buyer, do you encourage them to go out and check out open houses on their free time? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So usually like the system is like I'll get them set up on their MLS search, or like sometimes they'll send me stuff from Zillow or whatever.
Yeah.
And if they send me a few houses and like we're trying to coordinate showings or something, I always try to be there with my client. So
Yeah.
like I would rather like I'll go to an open house with my client, but like if there's a scheduling conflict where like I can't make it and like they have a house they're interested in and it's open, I'll be like, hey,
Yeah.
I can't make it at that time, but it's open from 1 to 3 today. If you guys want to go check it out, call me afterwards. Let me know how it went.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I'm there with the client, sometimes like, sometimes they get stars in their eyes and like, ooh, you know what I mean? But you can kind of reel them back a little bit and be like, hey, remember you said you didn't like this about certain houses or whatever, like, or the neighbors or, whatever. So I try to be there with my client, but I will, if I can't make it happen, then I'll let them go to the open house and everything. So, but yeah, usually we do private showings for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it seems like, especially this Saturday when I was out, most of the open houses I was in, there were multiple realtors in there with their sets of clients.
Yeah, and I'll even book, I'll still book the showing during the open house, just like the agent holding it knows that we're going to stop by and that, they already have an agent and all that type of stuff. But yeah, for the most part, I try to be with my client just because that's part of my job, I feel like. So,
right on.
But yeah, they are helpful though. If like, if I'm already showing one buyer, I already have appointments scheduled and like, hey, you like this house? Okay, it's open 1 to 3, or whatever. I can, kind of kill two birds with one stone sometimes. But I've had deals where my buyer went to an open house by themselves and they said they liked it and we got it under contract. And then we went back for inspections. They were like, ooh, it just doesn't seem as like nice now. I'm like, oh, I didn't notice the neighbor's yard was all trashy and this and that. And so we actually ended up canceling that contract on it. And I'm like, dang, that could have been something we avoided if I would have been there with them through the open house. Cause like, I don't know, some people are just like, you get the house ready for, showings and stuff. So it's all pretty. And then when we went back for the inspections, they got a couple kids, like there's like toys out everywhere. It looked lived in, right?
Right.
And I think during the open house, sometimes, again, you just get excited, especially if there's like a lot of people through there and you're like, oh, no, this is the one I want. Yeah. And then you get it and you're like, actually, I don't want it anymore.
That is interesting, though, to think about that because, if you go out and you start taking a look at houses on your own and you don't have a lot of experience in terms of, buying and selling houses, that type of thing, it would be, I can see how you would miss things.
Yeah.
I had a couple examples where I bought houses. And leading up to that, we weren't really actively in the market. and we were just walking through our neighborhood, stumbled upon a
Yeah.
house, an open house, just went in, and next thing we're in the market. But it would make sense to have a realtor to point out these type of things to avoid those problems down the line.
Well, those people that just kind of like wander through open houses, like, oh, I'm just looking. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the people on the car lot, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's some sort of interest there. Like,
Yeah.
if you walk through an open house, like,
That's
it's
true.
on your radar.
That's
at
true.
least a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, for people that aren't in the industry, don't know this, but like a lot of the times, the agent holding the open house is not actually the listing agent, and it's actually an agent that's trying to get new leads for those people that just wander through the open house, right? So it's a way to do that. But yeah, I mean, looking at houses is fun, and sometimes you just stumble upon the right one, and it just makes sense.
I was on in Johnson County. I think it was Merriam. I can't remember exactly what street it was on. Maybe like Lee or something. And the house was on the west side, and I parked on the street on the east side. And as I was like pulling in, there were like 3 different people and houses on that east side, sort of like zombies, like leaving their house, all coming across. So it is interesting to see. I mean, neighbors want to know like what's
sure.
going on.
Yeah, we call those the nosy neighbors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, sometimes they're nosy about like what's actually in there, but also it's an opportunity for them to sort of get an idea of what they think, what their house should be valued at, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So, so there's even a strategy like a private open house where you only invite the neighbors. It's called a nosy neighbor event or something like that. And again, from a realtor perspective, like a neighbor's probably not going to buy that house.
Right.
Right. But it's a strategy to then, maybe you find a neighbor that is maybe thinking about selling their house and they're just kind of curious, like, is my house nicer or worse than this house? And if this house sells for this much, then mine should sell for this much or whatever. Right. So, yeah, it's a great way to get leads. But I would say, in my experience anyways, open houses usually don't actually sell the house. It's a way to get foot traffic. It's a way to have perceived like scarcity and urgency for buyers that already have representation, and they're probably going to book a private showing anyways.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of realtors just send their clients to the open house. The client then sees, 5 other people at the house, they like it, and then it kind of creates I got to do something right now because I'm like, and these other 4 people might be neighbors or looky-loos that are just kind of bored on a Saturday.
Yeah.
But it creates that perception of like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot of attention on this house, and I really like it. I want to snag it up before anybody else does, right?
Yeah, people walking around. I mean, that's the type of energy that you would want to have in an open house, as opposed
100%.
to like somebody walk in and it's it's an empty open house. It's just you like sitting there by yourself, like scrolling through your phone.
Exactly.
And I think I can't remember if I told this to you, but like in '94, '95, I sold houses with my dad in Springfield. And really, what I would do is I would just hang out in the open house. And this is before cell phones. It was very boring. But we had a listing that like the second week I did an open house, somebody walked in, had unrepresented, loved the house, made an offer, and like so the first transaction that I had was like both ends on this pretty nice house back then. And my dad's like, "Yeah, this is not how it
does
works.
not
This is
normally
not
happen."
going to happen again." So,
But I mean, for a new agent or any agent, really, it can be a great lead source if you know how to like run that process and run the conversions on it. But
it's also a great way just to have conversations with people about real estate,
100%.
especially if you're new. I mean, you have the opportunity to like
100%.
sit there and people come through.
Yep, exactly. But on the flip side of that, sometimes you get a seller that says like, "Hey, I don't want to do an open house. I don't want just like any Tom, Dick, and Harry just walking through my house. Like, is that going to hurt us?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, not at all. Like, just to be fully transparent, open houses are mainly for the realtor to get more leads. So, you know what I mean? So, I've had that conversation with multiple sellers. Like, hey, not really comfortable with open house. We hear about theft or blah 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 whatever. And I'm like, that's not going to hurt us really in the slightest bit.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, I'm like, hey, just being transparent with you guys. Yeah. It's really so like the newer agents in my office can get some leads. Maybe share some of the love. So
it's my bread and butter. I mean, it's an opportunity for me to meet realtors instead of sit there and make phone calls.
Yeah, from a lender standpoint, it's totally makes sense because you're trying to find newer agents that maybe don't have a strong relationship with a lender or whatever, and mostly newer agents in open houses, and they're stuck there for 2 hours or whatever. So you just show up and.
But yes, I'm online. Yes, text, email, all that type of stuff. Making phone calls, I do all that. But I get energy from being around people. So.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it before, but just a lot of lenders are just online or just sitting behind the desk. So like the fact that you're actually getting up, walking through different areas, different houses, like you kind of have your thumb a little bit
Yeah.
more on the market
Yeah.
from like a product standpoint than just somebody that's sitting behind a desk all day.
It's also really helpful because, it's very easy as a lender to just sort of look at numbers and not really understand, what it is that that your clients are actually looking for
Yeah.
and trying to buy. And, you can have somebody who's talking about, hey, listen, my budget is it's a $250,000 house. Okay, well, so where are you looking? Oh, I'm looking in, Prairie Village. And then you're like, what do you need? And then you can sort of understand, okay, that's going to,
Right, that's gonna be a tough
it's
one.
not my, obviously the realtor should be like suggesting options and things like that, but it is something to be, for me, I feel like it's important to be aware of.
Yeah.
I want to understand the whole transaction because it's going to help me,
Exactly, it helps you
going forward.
serve clients better.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
Speaking on the markets, came across an article the other day. It said the KC market is cooling down.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
So it doesn't feel like it's cooling down in a lot of parts of the city. We still have a lot of multiple offer situations, super competitive scenarios. I think that with the uncertainty with like the tariffs, interest rates, I think there are certain people that are sort of backing off, sort of sitting on the sidelines a little bit. But the numbers are the numbers; they're not going to lie. But I do think it is super. I think it's super specific to the part of town, kind of.
100%, yeah. Because I was, sent you this article yesterday. I'm reading it. The headline is the Kansas City housing market is cooling down or whatever. And I'm like, man, I was like, if I sent this to some of my buyer clients right now, they're like that were actively shopping, they would laugh and just say this whole thing is a joke, right? Because like, I have some clients, dude, that like we're giving them hell, and like we still can't get anything under contract. Like, again, my client in Olathe, dude, I talk about detaching from the outcome and all this stuff all the time, right? I showed them a house last week, and I was like, this is the one. Like, I can just feel it, right? We go 21 grand over asking. We waive inspections. We give them the closing date the exact close date they need, which is like 2 months down the road. So like we have this super long close date for no reason.
Yeah.
We we gave them everything they asked for. We still lost it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
do you know how many offers?
There was 4 offers.
Okay.
And we lost because so the issue with like going crazy over, as we know, is like then we start running into appraisal issues, right? So we went over and we're like, I thought I was going to appraise because we actually wrote an offer on a house right behind that one. Also went like 25K over, and we lost that one as well. And so I'm like, okay, like I know this area. I know like the comps are going to support, these sales prices, but the listing agent has only sold like three houses. And so she was like, hey, we appreciate you guys came in really, really strong, but my client with another offer. And I was like, that's fine. That's just how it goes. But like, can you give me some feedback so I can like at least let my client know what happened? And she's like, we took a lower offer with worse terms because they were half cash. And so we're not going to, so they had an appraisal waiver. And I was like, okay, thanks for letting me know or whatever. But like after I stepped back and I was like, that agent like just kind of screwed their client, I think, because I don't think we're going to run into any appraisal issues. My client's coming in 3% down.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at a 3% down versus a 50% down, financing is stronger on their end. But if it appraises at the price that we offered and we waived our inspection terms, like that seller is going to walk away with more money in their pocket and a smoother transaction. But this, and again, it comes back to agents with experience and all that stuff. I think that agent kind of screwed that client by, taking money out of their pocket and potentially having a more difficult transaction with inspections and whatnot. But
no,
it is what it is.
So I agree. And I obviously I get paid to make mortgages, right? So
Right.
A cash deal doesn't do me any good. But I do think that I get frustrated because I think in a lot of ways, a listing agent is doing a disservice to their client by jumping on that cash scenario. And, now this really comes down to the lender.
Right.
You know, who has that client pre-approved, because a 3% down scenario is every bit as solid as a 50% down scenario.
This client is also through underwriting.
Yeah.
Everything's been verified. All we need is a contract and an
Yeah.
appraisal. Like it's like we're good to go.
And so did you have that conversation with that agent?
Yeah. The lender
Yeah.
called him and everything. They had a conversation, all that stuff. So
Yeah,
this is what it is. I mean,
I've seen that. I mean, I've been a part of a handful of transactions like that where you know it's thousands left on the table, and I don't know if it is a situation where the listing agent doesn't want to do the work, you know, isn't confident enough in themselves to ask the questions of the lender, or
Right.
you know or possibly they just didn't get the right vibes they wanted off of the lender. But I just think, you know, in this day and age, people used to have issues with like FHA and VA, right? Because they would assume FHA VA is going to be issue versus conventional. FHA VA has got some different requirements as far as like appraisals, but most of the things that show up on those appraisals would show up on a conventional appraisal, and if the appraiser calls that out, it still has to be addressed.
and you'll get into a multiple on a clean house, right? Like
Yeah.
the biggest concern with FHA and VA is wood rot chipping paint.
Yeah.
If you have something that's completely wrapped in vinyl, like there's no wood rot or anything,
Yeah.
that kind of like, for me, representing the buyer, I'm like, ours should not matter if it's FHA or VA versus the conventional right now, because like the stipulations that would like make somebody go away from a FHA, they're not here,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't really matter. But then you still get those agents that like they see conventional or cash and they're like, yes, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
I mean, I understand, and it all depends. Again, it all comes down to like setting expectations with your client. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that conversation sounded like. You know, when the listing agent's sitting at the kitchen table with the client, you know, it's presenting our offer and the other offer, right? So
Yeah.
who knows what? But I had a listing. I think we got our contract last week or the week before or something. But we listed it at 245. Got a VA offer at 261, but they want 10 grand in closing costs. Okay, better than our other offer. My seller's going to net more money
Right.
with that offer than another offer we had that was lower but better financing. I presented it. I'm like, guys, you have no wood rot, no chipping paint. Like as far as like our appraisal like stipulations go, like we don't have any issues to worry about. The only thing is we may not appraise at 261, but I think this is going to give us the best chance of getting the most money in your pocket, which is what they cared about. And so we ended up accepting that offer. We'll see. The appraisal was done on Friday, so we'll see how it comes back. But I started looking at other comps in the neighborhood, and there's a couple that are selling for like 290. They're a little bit of a different floor plan, a little more square footage, but I think we can justify a 261.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens, but I just set the expectation with my client of like, hey, you guys are potentially going to net more money with this offer, or you're going to guaranteed net less money with this offer, right?
Yeah.
So like if you guys want to gamble a little bit, we
Yeah.
can go up. It's definitely going to appraise for at least what this contract price was,
Yeah.
right? So like either way, we're going to be straight. But yeah, and I also think it comes down to the listing agents like risk adversity, right? Like
Yeah.
you know, again, it's not my money, so but as long as you explain those you know, pros and cons of each offer to your seller, then it usually pans out.
Well, the other thing that I think is sort of interesting about the market cooling down is over the last 3 weeks, I've had the same client go out in Johnson County making offers on properties. And, you know, I don't know how you document this or if it's just something that gets said, but in all three scenarios, you know, we were told there were 20 plus offers
Yes.
that came in on that property. So think about that. So first weekend, one property, that's 20 families that have like been in that house, placed an offer on that particular house. That is just one house. That doesn't necessarily feel like a cool down.
Exactly.
Do
So
you know what I mean?
that's why I
I
want
mean,
to talk about it today,
yeah.
right? Because like we all know the you know, the news has a goal, right? Of kind of selling fear, or you know, they like any content creator is going to make I'm probably going to use a similar headline, right, for this podcast, like
Yeah.
KC market's cooling down or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to grab that attention, but when you start digging into it, it's like it's never as scary or whatever as it sounds. And again, to the people that are in this every single day, especially our people, you know, down in Johnson County, they're just gonna laugh and throw this article in the trash, right? Because they're
Yeah.
like, dude,
Yeah.
yeah, like another offer in Johnson County listed at 315. we went 350, 60 plus showings, 20 plus offers. Ours wasn't even on the table as competitive.
60 plus showings.
60 showings.
That
it
is
was on the market
60
for 2
families.
days. Dude,
Yeah.
dude, our private showing literally had like 10 other agents walking through it.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of the busier, like, open houses I've even been at. And it wasn't an open house. It was a private showing. Mm-hmm. Or quote unquote private, right? Because they're doing overlappings. But, yeah. So, like, you know, getting back to the whole market cooling down, like, if we're going to be honest, like, you know, if we take our experiences out of it, like just the data, it is, right? Like, it actually is. Like, the numbers are kind of moving where, like, we're not as crazy. But you also have to keep that in perspective of, like, we're coming out of, like, one of the hottest real estate markets, like, in history.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we had the lowest, like, when we scale back to 2022, record low interest rates, the whole pandemic thing going on. Like, it's this very abnormal, like, blip in time. And so, yeah, when we start comparing normal to, like, a couple of years ago, it sounds like it's gloom and doom. Right?
Well, the other thing that's going to be a factor, and again, Johnson County is typically a higher price point.
Yeah.
Right. And so I might sound like I'm contradicting myself somewhat here, but we messaged about this over the weekend. What I'm seeing is clients in that like $180,000 to $300,000 range. That's not slowed down. And so, you know, I don't know how many of these properties that, you know, we're seeing people, you know, 500 grand plus, 600 grand plus that are pausing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That are taking themselves out of the market because, you know, they're not going to list their house because they're not going to buy a house until they have some sort of understanding of what's going on. And so there are a number of what I see is there are going to be some clients, some people that are hyper focused on, you know, equities, stock markets, that type of stuff, right? You know, they're very, you know, they just put a lot of emphasis on like financial markets. And then there are, you know, like who I would consider myself one of these people. You know, you're putting your money in your 401k. That's your primary source of investment, and you're just going about your life.
Right.
Those people, I think there's still some opportunity for those people.
Oh, yeah.
As the people that would be much more market focused and driven, kind of like pause because they're looking at, you know, all this stuff with the tariffs.
Yeah.
They're looking at a number of unknowns there. But, you know, we've done a number of these podcasts, and we could really like boil it all down to about 30 seconds each time, which is like rates go up and down, property values like always go up.
Yeah.
You know? But I do feel like the people that aren't like your market watchers right now have the benefit of little less competition because those people are kind of on the sidelines right now.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to a want versus a need, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if we look at our stats here, right? So like the average home price in Kansas City is $360,000,
Yeah.
right? Which is up 8% from last year, which is that's a great appreciation.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing is you have your average person, right? Like you have, like we all have, there's wants and needs, right? So like those people over, you know, 400, 500, 600 plus, those people are more of the market watchers, more of like the want, right? Like, oh, I don't like this kitchen anymore. Or,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, oh, I want to live in a different area. Like they more so want to live somewhere else when it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, the world's kind of crazy right now. I'm like, it's not. I'll live with this kitchen until next year. We'll see what's going on next year, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, our people our average home price and a lot below, right? Like these people need housing, right? They have leases that are going to expire, you know, next month. And if they don't buy a house, their rent is going to be raised.
Right.
Right. And then they feel like they're losing money every single month when they pay their landlord.
Right.
Or you got families that have babies and they don't have space anymore. Or, you know, people get divorced. Like all these people, they have housing needs and homes are just so difficult to afford right now that it just creates such this competition where it's like a lot of people, unless they absolutely need to move, are kind of staying on the sidelines because it's difficult.
Yeah.
So that's why we're seeing like closed sales are down, pending sales are down. Like there's just less total demand right now because it's difficult. But no matter what, I think it's the 4 Ds of real estate. It's diapers, death, divorce, and disaster.
Okay.
Right.
Which are different than the 4 Ds of dodgeball.
Yeah, they are. Dip, dodge, dip, dodge. Yeah, so the 4 Ds of real estate. Diapers, right? If you have an expanding family, you need a bigger house, right? Unless you're just going to throw some bunk beds in each room, right? Divorce, people get split up and they probably don't want to live with each other anymore, right? So you
Yeah.
got, death. You got people that, the owner passes away and now you go through the whole probate deal and now you just have this empty house. Let's put some
Yeah.
money in the family's pocket, right? And then disaster, right? So like flooding, tornadoes, blah, blah, all that type of stuff, right? Or even economic disaster. We're now like, or even personal financial disaster. Now
Yeah.
I'm going through bankruptcy and I got to sell this thing or whatever, right? So those are like what cause people to move,
Yeah.
right? And so that stuff is never changing. Like there's always going to be people going through that. But yeah, at these higher price points, really above the average home sales price, those people can be a little more picky and choosy with when they're going to time it, and that, if the money's right, if the market's right, if the world is right, blah blah blah. So me personally, I'm seeing, like, I have a listing listed at 500 right now, and it's, we're getting some traction on it, but it's just moving a lot slower, right? Versus my 245 listing I just talked about, that multiple offers in 3 days, right? Because
Yeah.
there's just more people that can afford it. It's more of just like your average person's house, right? And those are always going to be moving.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, and the other thing that's interesting about it is, we had our conference call this morning with at the office, and our locks, which is, once somebody goes under contract, they're pre-approved, they go under contract, then you lock, which is basically, you're locking in the rate, they've committed, they're moving forward in the loan process with you. Our locks are up. Like we're doing more loans, at the same time that we're being told that the market itself is cooling. So it's situational. The other thing, I would be curious about, where are these price points too that you're seeing those homes come out?
Well, that's what's interesting too, right? So like, these stats are from KCRAR, right? They're like the board of realtors, right?
Yeah.
So like we have our whole like Heartland MLS. It's the whole like kind of region, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like these stats are for the greater Kansas City area. I don't really know what that boundary looks like.
Yeah.
But so like our stats for this, right, what the board is giving us versus the Redfin study that the article we're referring to did, the numbers are different.
Yeah.
And so like real estate is just so hyper local as far as the market. It gets very difficult to compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges, right? So like if I'm looking over here, this is an apple, this is an orange, because Redfin says average days on market for Kansas City is 34, but KCRAR says it's 52, right? So it really depends, what county are you looking at? Like what's that total area, right? Because like if I include not as in demand areas, right? If I include Grandview and Excelsior Springs and like these kind of places out on the outskirts of town, it's going to drive our averages the wrong way. Or not necessarily the wrong way, but it's going to drive our days on market up, it's going to drive our average sales price down, right? Versus if like we just focus on like whatever, I don't know what Redfin's Kansas City market was either, right? So it's hard to really get correct data, because like you can have two different numbers and they're both correct. It just depends what you're actually looking at.
I also think that the data is, it's not necessarily relevant to the individual borrower or buyer.
It's not, because it's such a case by case basis, right? So like just like the conversation I was just having with one of our clients about seller paid closing costs and stuff, and it's like I can't just say like, yeah, these are all the houses that we're going to have seller paid closing costs on, right? Like it's so situational depending on how long the house has been on the market, the seller, blah, 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 right? So like it's good to kind of have this data and look at it and just kind of be aware of what's average going on. But, it's such a case by case basis.
Well, and the other thing is the data is only as good is only as useful as the knowledge base of the person who's interpreting it, right? And so you can look at this and you can be like, okay, this is an overall market situation, but that there are different pockets that are going to be impacted differently.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before, the time to connect with the realtor, the time to connect with the lender is early in the process, because again, what you're seeing in the media, what you're seeing in the data, that is typically, a lagging indicator.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all stuff from March, right? So like we're halfway through April now. We're almost at the end of April.
Yeah. That's actually pretty remarkable, really, when you consider that is March and we are going to be May next week, which is nuts, because it just goes to show how quickly
things can switch, dude. Yeah. We can dive into the whole rate thing here too, but the issue with the data is if they're going to get a month's data, first you have to wait for the month to end.
Yeah.
and then it takes time to process and sift through all that data and put it in, this digestible little cute little chart right here, right? So usually we don't get the month's data until like maybe the second week of the month. So we're not going to get April's stats until like mid-May, right? So it's like, okay. And so again, it's good to pay attention to this stuff on our end so that we can kind of explain stuff to our clients. But it's such a lagging thing. Like that was last month already.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot has changed since last month. So.
Right. The other thing that's interesting about the data, and maybe this is not a good point to bring up, but it now provides something for somebody to spend. Do you know what I mean? A salesperson can take any number and figure out an angle in which to approach it, in which to like build value in their position and what they want to have happen. I mean, it's just
that's hilarious.
And most people are aware of that, right?
Yeah.
But again, it boils down to what's the individual specific need that you have, what your time in the market, what your goal is, what you're looking to accomplish.
Yep.
And and again, I mentioned the people that are hyper focused on equity markets and stocks and things like that. That is different than from the person that maybe in some cases is just wanting a place that they know they're like what their payment's going to be for the next like 5 years.
Yeah.
Because if you're renting that number can change every year with your landlord.
Yeah.
And so I find that the people that want a place to live, do life, raise their family, they're always in the market, and their wants and needs, their timing, that's dictated by like real world things that they're dealing with on the day to day.
Yeah, exactly. And actually I have a great, this is me with my salesman pitch spinning this, right?
Yeah.
So, but we have a client that is way below this average sales price in a typically very competitive price point, under 200K in the Northland. And we were actually able to go out and get this thing under contract and get his closing costs paid for.
Yeah.
And I think that is partly due to what the market is doing right now.
Yeah.
Right. So we always get the question, is now the right time to buy? Right. And so what I think that comes from is like, if I buy this house right now at 200, is the market going to crash and I'm going to be upside down in it? Right? I think that's people's fears. Like, oh, am I going to buy this and then disaster is going to happen and now I'm upside down and I'm stuck in this house, right? So if we look at it from that point, as far as what we can tell, no, right? Like properties are up 8.2% from last year, right? So like we know like investment-wise, like home prices are appreciating.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we're going to try to find like the opportunity, with interest rates being higher, with prices going higher, affordability is an issue, which is probably why we're seeing the cool down of market activity, which is great for people that are ready to enter the market.
Yeah.
Because now you're not going to have to fight quite so much, which again, if I tell this to some of my active clients right now, they're going to laugh and tell me to F off because they're fighting 20 plus offers, right? Yeah. But imagine how it would be if interest rates just dropped 2%. Oh, now it's 80 offers, right? Like it's ridiculous. And so, and again, it depends on the location and all that stuff, right? So if you find the right house in the right place, you can kind of get your cake and eat it too a little bit, because there's not quite as much competition right now, even though it feels, to specific buyers in specific areas, it feels very, very competitive, and it is. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, there is opportunity for deals to happen right now, because overall market activity is a little bit slower than it has been in the past.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And excuse me. And again, it's super market specific, and it just goes back to the, if it's something that you're considering doing, if it's something that you have on your mind, like have a conversation with a professional, whether it's a realtor or a lender early in the process. Mm-hmm. We've talked about like on Yahoo Finance or whatever. That's an app that I look at on my phone.
Yeah.
And so every time I see them post like, hey, mortgage rates are dropped, they're lower, or hey, mortgage rates are higher, it is always it's not accurate. It's always almost always like the opposite. If I see them post a story that talks about how low rates are, they're posting that, and the last 2 days rates have done nothing but go up.
Right.
And so I don't know if that's the same, data processing over a period of time.
Stuff. Yeah, it's like data is a lagging indicator because it takes time to process it, and especially these big, Yahoo and the board of, Kansas City realtors and stuff. Like, there's hoops to jump through, right? Like, I can't just push it out. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's got to
Yeah.
go through this guy and that guy and the next guy and the CEO, blah blah.
Yeah.
So by the time it actually hits the public, like it's old news.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but the rate thing for me, and I just, every winter, I mean, I'll make multiple reels about this week. Again, the rate thing is the one thing that you can adjust. You can change that after the fact. And as long as you're like smart about it and you're not extending yourself, and you can handle the payment that you initially get when you lock that and when you close that, there's only an opportunity for it to improve.
right.
But I mean, housing prices just continue to go up.
Yep.
And even in times where property values have dropped, it's over a short period of time. And I think the vast majority of home buyers are not buying that house to turn around and flip it in a short period of time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, obviously you want it to continue to appreciate. You want to have the opportunity and flexibility. Soon, if you're somebody who's like, this is my first house and we're going to move into a bigger house, if that's
Right.
your plan, obviously you want that appreciation to take place at a steady. But for most people, when they buy a house, their intent is to be in it for some time. And it is an appreciating asset, but I mean, there's so many decisions that we make,
Yeah.
on things that are depreciating assets. Do you know what I mean? That
Dude,
like
it's so
just
funny.
whimsically just like make a decision over.
Yeah, dude, what's so funny is, buying a new house on a radar or whatever. And so I'm like, okay, I'm like just like thinking in my head, I'm like, all right, I want to buy a new house. And then like maybe next year I'm going to buy a new truck. So I'm like looking at the 2025 Tundras and stuff. And they're like, the TRD Pros are like 70K.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at them like, oh yeah, those are badass. And like, I'm going to sleep last night and I was like, that is the stupidest thing I would ever do to spend 70K on a new truck, especially if I just bought a house and now my payment's more and blah, blah, that stuff. So I'm like, it's like kind of instant gratification. They're like, ooh, it'd be so nice to be like in the new car with the, the nice leather and interior and stuff. And people go out and make those decisions, boom, like
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I just picture like, I'm going to buy this truck for 70K. And as soon as I drive it off the lot, it's worth 60K now. And I'm like, God, like I was glad I kind of thought that through. I was like,
Yeah.
probably, maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see. But yeah. But then when it comes to a house, and again, a house is a big decision. It's just,
My wife and I, we've and I've talked to you about this as well. I mean, we need some space. She is a gardener. I mean, she would have livestock. I mean, the whole bit. And so I've found myself sort of making that, like thinking, okay, we've looked at some properties in the past, and I've sort of been like, I don't know, man, I don't know, can we resell this? But the reality is we're not gonna resell. I mean, who knows what's going to happen?
Right.
But what I'm really looking for is a place that we can basically like settle in and like kind of
Yeah.
like build
Call
up
your
and develop
home.
or whatever. And I think for most of the people that I work with, most of the clients that I work with, that's what they're wanting to do. You know, I don't necessarily think. Very few people, we talked about this before the podcast. Very few people are going to be in a house for 360 consecutive payments, 30
Right.
years. They're going to make a move before then. But the time frames that we see these ups and downs in the market, their ownership is going to outlast that
For sure.
that time frame.
Yep.
And even if there were to be a downturn, it's
buy
going to
and hold.
reverse. But it's just so hard for me in Kansas City. I can look at some of the other markets that I'm licensed in and I can be like, yikes. But in Kansas City, for me, the things that would have to happen for property values to take a legitimate hit, like sustained hit,
Right.
those are things that are going to have us like,
we got bigger
stocking up with
problems.
canned
Yeah,
goods. I mean,
right,
the whole bit.
Right.
There's just so much. There's so much development in Kansas City. There's so many people. I talk to people multiple times a week that are selling. I mean, it's been going on for decades now. But they're selling out of the West Coast, selling out of the East Coast, and they are coming
Yep.
here. You look at all the development in terms of businesses and things like that are coming to the Midwest and to Kansas City. If March slows down, I mean, I still think we're going to have a pretty solid year.
Oh yeah, I mean, May is gonna be my best month I've ever had.
Yeah.
So I mean, like it's again like I have a belief that like we create our own little markets.
Yeah.
Like we get to control. Like we can't control none of this, can't control none of that. We control our daily activities, our attitudes, our thoughts, blah blah, all that stuff. So like whatever's going on in the world, like you can look at any like catastrophic event ever in history. There's people that came out on top.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like there's always opportunities. There's always room for growth. That's a whole different topic on a podcast, but I mean, for me, like same thing, right? Like I just think there's so much opportunity in Kansas City. Like if you just look at everything, so even like this article that we are talking about, it even said that like even though the Kansas City market is cooling down, we are still selling faster than like the national average.
Yeah.
So like according to Redfin's study that they did, our average days on market was 34 days.
Yeah.
The national average is 47 days. So it was saying that even though that Kansas City last year in March was 27 days, now it's 34 days, so it's cooling down, right? It's still faster than your national average, and I think that's because if you also look at the average home price, Kansas City's a deal.
Yeah.
Like the I didn't look this up, so it's gonna be a random, not quite a random number, but I think that like the national average home price is like 440 grand or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at the national average, so like our sales price is almost 100 grand lower on average. So
Yeah.
the same house in wherever whatever state versus ours, it's almost 100 grand less. And I don't know, there's just something about Kansas City that people kind of like. Like it's a little bit, especially if you're coming from the coast. Like it's central to everything. It's a little bit more of like that hospitality. Or I hear people all the time from California come in. They're like, oh my gosh, everybody is so nice
Yeah.
here. Like everybody's just so kind and the hospitality, blah, blah, blah. Like everybody's so
Yeah.
mean. And I'm like, I've never known anything else.
Right.
So I'm like, really? But yeah.
Yeah. So I'm licensed in Washington. I do a fair amount of business, or I've had in the past. I've done a fair amount of business in Seattle, and I have some clients pre-approved in Washington right now, Seattle area, and pre-approved for $500,000. Everybody's excited. Yeah, we're good to go. And the realtor is like, this is going to be tough. I'm like, tough? I mean, 500 grand. And he's like, yeah, it is a single family home. He's talking about, maybe we can get into a condo, depends on what the HOA
Wow.
is. And so I go in and I start digging around, looking in that area for $500,000 homes. And these are homes that would be $200,000 homes, like, in the Northland here.
Dude, this is a perfect story to wrap this up. Are you still going?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can give you other examples. I have people
Well,
in Virginia, the exact same thing, and you look at it, and it just shows like the different perspective. It's just mind-boggling to look at a $200,000 house here, and somebody in a different part of the country would line up to pay half a million dollars for it.
Okay, so you have buyers in Seattle right now.
Yeah.
That are pre-approved for $500,000 that could maybe get a condo or a small single-family home, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect story to wrap this whole like value in Kansas City thing up. I have buyers under contract right now for $495 in a 2-story house in Liberty that's over 300,000 square feet, or not 300,000.
Wow.
3,000 square 300,000 square feet. It's like 4 or 5 beds, like 4 or 5 bathrooms. Like, dude, this master bedroom is like the most baller thing I've ever seen. It's
Yeah.
like a freaking, like you walk in, it's this huge room that like forks off this way with like vaulted ceilings and like a freaking fireplace. And then you walk into the master bathroom and it's like literally marble everywhere with like a wraparound walk-in closet, like super baller house in Liberty. The golf course is in the neighborhood
Yeah.
for $495.
Yeah.
Right. And then you go to Seattle
Yeah.
and you can barely get a 3-bed, 2-bath,
Yeah.
for $500.
So one of the most, I had a client in California, just outside of San Diego, a veteran, and he was getting me the information. He was like, "Hey, I need to get my pre-approval. Found this house, like a $1.6 million house, blah blah blah." And I'm thinking, okay, all right. And so I'm working up the pre-approval. I asked him to send me over the address so I can make sure my taxes and
Right.
everything are right. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. Now, San Diego is beautiful. I mean, it is beautiful. I love being in San Diego. $1.6 million for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that was like, I don't even know that there was a lawn. I mean, there was just so little like surface area that it was
Yeah.
on. And so, I mean, we are a great value. The fact that it's tough at $180,000.
It is.
It's nearly impossible at $150,000. But if you're patient in Kansas City, you can find these properties.
And if you're open to some areas, kind of on the outskirts and stuff,
Yeah.
or even in the city, if you can find
Yeah.
a ton of stuff under 150 in the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Well, I was driving through kind of the Hyde Park area
Yeah.
yesterday,
All
and
over
I
the place.
found a house that was like, I think it was 280 if I'm not mistaken, but I mean, it was just a beautiful older
Yeah.
house that had been like restored. You know, I mean, it wasn't huge. The bedrooms were small, but I was
Right.
sort of shocked at like when you look just a couple blocks away, you have like $1 million homes, and it was a nice neighborhood. So
Yeah.
so I think we're very fortunate to be in Kansas City for a lot of different reasons, but certainly the fact that like homes are still, even as chaotic as it's been, homes are still pretty affordable.
Yeah, if you put the grand scheme into perspective, it's
Yeah.
I'm grateful to be in Kansas City for
But
sure.
can you imagine like somebody coming to you and telling you like what they need in a house, and then like them being like, "And our budget's $1 million," and being like, "Ooh, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think."
know. Dude, the only thing that like blows my mind about all that, like I'm just thinking, I'm like, how do these people in like Seattle or Cali or whatever, like, what kind of jobs they even have to like, where 500 just like, you know what I mean? Like, do they make more money in these places?
So, yeah, I think there is. And so,
Do you know what I mean?
But so the interesting thing about Seattle for me is that most of the people that I work with in Seattle are hourly. Most of them, just sort of this pocket that I work within, they work somehow connected to SeaTac, the airport there. And they have just done all the things that you're supposed to do. They have just paid their bills on time. They have paid attention to, you know, their debt to income. They have lived responsibly. They would be, if they were in Kansas City, like, you know, I would think this would be like $250,000 to $300,000 price point. And so it's pretty remarkable to qualify them for
Right.
a $500,000
That's what I'm
home,
saying.
because you know it's there's two pieces of it, right? There's the income, but there's also what you have going out.
Right.
And so it is sort of, it's kind of inspirational to know.
Well, it's interesting to me too, because it's like the cost of living is usually higher in
Yeah.
Seattle or Cali, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, in my head, I'm like, okay, does a freaking secretary in KC make, I don't know, 40 grand, 50 grand or whatever, and then in Seattle they make what, 150? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like I just don't know how the math works out. Even if they're being frugal, it's like stuff just seems more expensive. Which I mean, maybe it's just you just got to pick and choose how you live. But
Yeah,
it kind of racks my mind a little bit.
Your cost of living, I mean, it's going to dictate what those companies and businesses pay. I mean, they're going to pay more for people,
Right.
you know, for some of these same jobs out there. But what I take away from it is that they set about, whether it was 5 years ago or whether it was 10 years ago, they're like, we are going to buy a house, we're going to have X amount of dollars, and they just put their heads down and they just did it at a time when rates and everything is crazy, where a lot of people are talking about pulling back and holding back. They are ready. You know, and so that when you say you kind of make your own like market or whatever, I mean, it's true. I mean, when you're ready, you're going to be ready.
Yeah.
And the sooner you sort of make that decision, understand what it is it's going to take to accomplish that goal, you know, the more likely you are to accomplish that goal.
I love that. It's a good place to end that thing.
Yeah, right on.
Beautiful.
All right.
That was good.
Yeah. God, I was so excited. I'm like, 500 grand. Hell yeah, let's go. And then like